Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, my friend. It's Saturday, February 18th, 2023, and we're seeing the top of that. Let's go this way. How's that? Is that better? Will that work? Okay, I think so. Okay. We start this off every week like this. It changes, and I haven't moved anything, so I don't know why that does that. Anyway, let's get right into it. So we've been chatting a lot about a lot of different things. And this week, I want to chat about this. I know we talked about it a little bit before we touched on it, but I really want to talk about it today. And I was really afraid to bring up this topic. And I almost didn't share this with you because I was worried about my grandkids. Like, I freaking love my grandkids more than anything in the world. Well, not more than my kids. It's my family. So I was very, very concerned and worried about my grandkids sharing my whole life story to the world about the things that I did and didn't do and all the things and how would this affect my grandkids. I even had imposter syndrome for a while. And then, I'm so partnered with amazing mentors that challenge me to be better, do more, be more. And they said, you know what? You have a great, wonderful message to share to the world. So why don't you tell people that you were a former topless entertainer at a club in Minneapolis for 17 and a half years, and that the lies that you taught your kids had proved to be some pretty serious consequences in some things and obviously in a lot of other things. It enriched their lives because they were very spoiled. I did so much for them. They were, they had a beautiful home to live in. I got to do all the things with them, the football, baseball, softball, all of the school events, all of the things that really meant anything, right? And family is everything to me. And so what I did is I taught my littles to lie. And what do I mean by that? So obviously being in the industry there as a topless entertainer, a topless entertainment dancer, right? There is a definite judgment about that. And people are like, oh my gosh, your mom is a hooker, your mom is this. And I probably should be careful about my words. Sorry, Facebook, I not mean to offend anybody. I'm just talking about the industry that I was in. And so there's all these things that a very judgmental industry. And my kids got the wrath of that at some point, right? And I had shared, I think it was last week or the week before, a little bit about my son in baseball. We were at a baseball game and this little dude came running up to me and he's crying and he's like, Mom, all these kids are calling you all these names and they think you're, this and that and the other thing. And I said, do you even know what that means? And so, and he didn't, he had no idea. He just know that the way that they were presenting themselves and telling him things, he had an idea it was very, very, very bad for him. And I said, sweetheart, I said, this is what mommy does for a living, all right? Not that you don't know this, but let's chat about this a little bit. I said, all I do is I don't dance nude for people. I dance with my top off. Nobody can touch me. Nobody can do anything. I don't sell myself for money. Like, I don't do that. And so, and then I said to him, I said, well, and isn't that interesting that these kids would even say that to you in the first place? So doesn't that mean that their mom or that their dads were in my place of business? Probably bought a dance from me. I can almost guarantee it that that's what happened. And so then they go back home, to the moms that are okay with their dads being in my club and running their mouth saying all these things like, oh my gosh, that lady that shows up at the baseball games? I had a dance from her. You know who that is? That's that boy's mom. Like, really? So I told my son, I said, I want you to do mommy a great big favor. I said, at the end of your game, when everybody's all huddled together and you all are doing your thing and the coach is talking to all you kids in the huddle, and wait till the moms and dads are around too. And I want you to go right up to the boy and boys that were giving you grief. And I want you to say to them, how do you know that my mom is anything? How do you know anything about my mom unless your dad was in my mom's club? And never once, ever after that, did anybody ever say anything about me to him again, ever. And when people did ask about, and then it was at that point too, where I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is not a good thing. Right? It was at that moment that I taught my kids to lie. And not to lie and like to tell bad lies. Like, I definitely not going to say bad lies. But what did happen was, though, is I taught them to tell half truths, right? Like, they didn't have to tell people where their mom worked. They didn't have to tell people what their mom did for a living. They didn't have to tell people that their mom put a roof over their head and clothed them and gave them all the things that they wanted. Was able to attend every single baseball game, every single school conference, all the things, right? They did not have to disclose any of how I did that. And so what we did is we just started telling people that my mom works at a bar. And then if people asked what bar, they would just say, well, I guess you're going to have to walk around downtown until you find her. And really it became a game. It was a lying game. And so that's what we did. And when people even asked me, and it was great for me because I came from a very, very high-end club. And it was a beautiful, gorgeous, stellar club. It still is. It's definitely not the same as when it first started. And just to give a little backstory about that, Michael J. Peters, who formed Solid Gold in Minneapolis, Minnesota, he wanted to change the stigma around female dancers. And that's what I'm here to do too, is to, share a little bit of the backstory and to share what I went through in the 17 and a half years that I danced at this club. I can pretty much honestly say that if I were to go in the Guinness Book of World Records, I'd be the only female dancer that ever danced at the same place for 17 and a half years, because it's really unheard of to do that. First of all, most dancers last usually around 7 years. And interestingly enough, there was a few of us, a handful of us that lasted at our club for many, many years. And some of these girls too were in and out, went other places and came back. And I faithfully stayed. Like, my family was grounded. We were grounded in Minneapolis. So we were grounded there. It was my job. It's what I did, and it's not who I am. So people that know me for who I am didn't even know what I did. And so when they asked me what I did, and again, I told little white lies too. I just, I told people that I was an entertainer. And interestingly enough, they never went into the next question. They never asked me like, what kind of entertainment? And it was the all adult entertainment club, or they would ask, well, what do you do? And I say, I'm in sales. And they're like, what do you sell? Well, it's true. Every single hour on the hour, we sold merchandise. We sold t-shirts, cups, whatever the club decided to, sell, 2 dances and a t-shirt, or 2 dances and whatever it was for $20. That was our hourly sale. And so I became really great at just telling people I was in sales, even at jobs. After I left the industry and went into other jobs, they would ask what I did, and I would just say I was in sales, working at a nightclub. Nobody asked me any questions. So for me, asking the questions didn't ask questions worked out really well. And again, I never fully told people what I did for a living. And my family all knew, my friends that were closest to me knew, and obviously the people that came into the club knew, but it wasn't something that I talked about outside of that until now, right? So I've been out of the business since, you guys, I got to get you the exact date, but it was late. I didn't leave the industry. I'm 62. I'll be 63 next month. I didn't leave the industry until, surprisingly, I was 48. And when I was 48, I looked like I was like 32. And I can say that, I'm not saying that egotistically or anything like that. It is just what it was. And in the last year, things are falling like really, really fast. And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that in a whole other issue. And I have talked about it in other videos. If you go back, you'll find out that I had breast implant illness and I had explanted, and I'm really going through a major healing process, and it's really, really has taken a toll on my body. And I do have to say that I'm so grateful to have my life back, that I'm okay with all the wrinkles and the falling and all that for the moment, right? Because we're going to go into talking about that next week. We're going to talk about vanity. And what a toll that has on us mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually. There's so much around that subject, and I cannot wait to get into that. Today we're talking about being a mom, telling the lies, and teaching my kids to lie, right? So the three things that came out of that for me was, one, it is very, very consequential. So my kids suffered a lot of consequences from that, and I didn't realize how much. And then I thought later on, I mean, like, I took on a lot of guilt from this. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even really, like I thought about this with my mom and like with my brothers, and I'm like, you know what, they're adults. They can either like it or not, figure it out or not. But you know what, when I was making the money, everybody was happy. And then when wasn't making the money more, it was like when the money ran out, everybody ran out. Like, it was kind of crazy, but I learned a lot in that. And anyway, so when talking about my kids though, and I was talking about my grandkids, and even talking about this subject about where I worked, you know, and the people that were in the industry, the customers, the people I worked with, the other entertainers, the other topless dancers, you know, the people on the floor, our servers, our greeters, our valet, our DJs. Like, it is a big, big, big business. And now I'm not in the porn industry. So, and excuse me again, Facebook, if I'm saying words I'm not supposed to, that's not, and this isn't to judge them or put them down either. It's choices. It's choices about what we choose to do. And again, I chose to tell my kids to tell white lies. And when I was, you know, contemplating either talking about this or coming to you about this, it happened again. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm scared to tell my story because of my grandkids. Because why? Because again, I'm lying. I'm lying to my grandkids. Like, oh my gosh, like when that moment hit me, I was like, no, 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 no. There is no holding back. There's no more behind the lines of speaking and, you know, like, oh, well, you know, in my industry, or, you know, all these things. I'm like, you know what? My kids are my kids. My grandkids are my grandkids. And you know what? If I can't talk openly about what I did for a living, because I can promise you they love me for who I am, not what I did, right? And so they were a big lesson to me, even teaching me that it is about what I did and not who I am. And so my kids, though, having them have to lie, really, and so here's my thought process. So I'm teaching my kids not to tell the whole truth. So then what happened is my middle one, oh my gosh, the stories that he could come up with. He is the biggest storyteller. Oh my God. And I didn't even put it together until just like a few months ago. And I was like, no wonder this kid can tell stories, because he didn't have to tell the whole truth, right? At the same time, though, I loved his stories because he's such a dreamer and a visionary. And he could put together, and my grandson, my little 5-year-old, is exactly like his daddy. And I just love it so much. And now there's a whole different thought and idea about that, though, because now when my little 5-year-old is really telling the story, is like, I encourage him to keep dreaming and to keep talking and to keep going. And my 3-year-old does the same thing. They all do. All my grandkids do. And every single day too, I have notes going into my 10-year-old's lunchbox and affirmations about how great he is and all the things that he's, you know, constantly, you know, doing. And I didn't do those things with my children. And at that time, I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware that was a possibility. And at that time, it was just so negative. My kids will tell you, like, I drove them crazy. Like, everything was to the, I'm over. Like, I'm too much. In fact, they just sent a video the other day. And I was like, oh my God, I am that mom. They're like, Mom, this is you. And I'm like, and I'm watching, I'm like, it didn't hit me until, honestly, this second as I'm talking to you, that like, so there is a TikTok video, and this mom, you know, she's up at her daughter's window, or her son. You don't see the other person, but the mom is, oh, honey, I love you so much. And just have a really great day. And you be good, you know, you be great. And she keeps walking away and keeps coming back, right? Keeps coming back. Well, I did that very negatively, though, when my kids were growing up, because I was so super scared that something's going to happen to them. Like my daughter, for an example, was super, super talkative, and she loved everybody, and she would just tell you everything and anything. And I finally one day she was standing literally at the corner where we lived. It was just like a house away, and she's standing at the corner, and somebody had walked by, and she's just all chit chat, and I was like, no. I went and grabbed her. I brought her in the house, and I told her the most wickedest, evil, most horrible things that could happen to her if somebody got a hold of her. She's got to stop being so nice to people. And to this day, she is 38 years old, and it has affected her greatly. So if you don't think that the things that we say or do or instill a belief in our littles doesn't affect them, we're still working through that garbage, right? We're still working through somebody else's beliefs about things, and she's really working through that. Like literally still has nightmares to this day about it, because I seriously was so graphic and so explicit. So I was so angry that she wouldn't listen to me, and she kept talking to strangers, that I didn't know any other way and how to get through to her to stop freaking talking to people without giving her like the worst of the worst of the worst. And I have been that way, right? So I've always been over the top. And again, so when they sent me that video and telling you about it, like that hit me like dead on, straight on, like, oh my gosh, I was like, seriously, we're over the top. And now I'm like over the top the other direction though, right? Like over the top, feeling my grandbabies just full of affirmations, just full of greatness, full of goodness. And I realized too that I'm living in Florida right now, and I'm from Minnesota. My family lives in Minnesota. And what has happened is I've been here for 10 months, coming up this month. And my landlord is he's 95, the sweetest guy. I love this family, you guys. They have been such a huge blessing to me this year. They have treated me like family, took me in like family. And I'm going to feel really, really sad to leave them. However, they were a moment for me that Dad, the 95-year-old, he was his son Michael, who I am in constant communication with, was sharing with me that his dad, was he's having dementia challenges right now, and so they're really concerned about him. And now he's starting to shuffle, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are things that my mom did, So we were able to talk about these things because we have a commonality, right? Well, 5 minutes after the conversation, his wife calls and says, your dad got hurt really, really bad. Well, his dad had actually fallen and had, cracked a bone in his face, broke the septum in his nose, broke a wrist, and like sent just a total black and blue face. And so all these things started coming together, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if something happened to my family, what in the world am I doing here in Florida? Like, why am I here? Well, one of the reasons I came to Florida in the first place was as I envisioned that I wanted to write my book. I wanted to meet up with all of the managers who now are club owners down here in Florida that I used to work with in Minnesota. I had these grandiose ideas of doing podcasts and interviews and all the things, and having, listening and living through this with my landlord's family. I was like, oh my gosh. And my kids and I have talked about this. If something happened to me, what would happen? I've been living very, very minimal, so they don't have to deal with anything. That was big on my list before I even came down here. And like, if something happens to me, just cremate me and just send me my ashes to Minnesota, right? But I'm like, what happens if something happens to my family? Like, I just can't get there in 2 minutes. Like, I'm hours away, and even a flight away. And I said, no, this cannot happen. Like, I've got to be with my family. Now I completely understand why there's families and people do not move out of 10-mile radius of each other. And I decided I'm just going to be a snowbird. Like, that's exciting to me. And then I can go visit the east side of Florida is where I really want to be, all the things, right? So I stopped telling the lies to myself, just like I stopped telling the lies to my kids, stopped telling the lies to my grandkids. Like, this is my life. This is what it was for 17 and a half years. And does not define who or it doesn't define who I am, and it doesn't even define it, but it is what I did. So it has been a huge, big, huge growth process here for the last 10 months. And I have been doing the things, been doing all these back things. And you'll definitely see, all these things as we move forward. But I just wanted to let you know that, when we talk to our kids, and I know there's a lot of my friends that have been in the industry, there's obviously women and men going into the industry every single day, that I just really want you to take a really great hard look at why you're doing what you're doing. And like I said, for me, it was my family. I didn't want to be on welfare. I didn't want to be on food stamps. And I definitely was not. I had values and I still have them. And there was a crossing line, and you didn't get to cross that line. And when it got to the point where girls were doing things for $1, when we were doing dances for $20 and we weren't being touched and none of those things. And when people started, doing things for $1 and it started ruining it for everybody else, that was when I was like, you know what, I'm out of here. And these girls did not listen. And, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why are you doing this to yourselves? Like, they're beautiful, they're young, you've got so much going for you. And so this is why next week I'm super excited about the whole vanity piece, because it gets to a point where you do things that you don't want to do, and you do things knowingly that you feel you have to because there's other people that are doing it. Like, for example, getting breast implants and then being sick with it, and then everybody thinks you're a liar because you're sick all the time. And that's a whole other story. I do have a video. If you look down, underneath, there's a whole video on breast implant illness. Feel free to go take a look at that. But this goes on with our kids too, right? So my being a topless entertainer or topless dancer, taking my clothes off, how do you think that affected my kids? And I never really, really got into really understanding that, because here's another thing that I've been very, very good at my whole life, because I'm a survivor of all sorts of things. And so I was like, we'll be fine, right? It'll be okay. I remember being on a Jerry Springer show before Jerry Springer started being crazy about all these things. He was a national talk show, and he actually had us on his show. And I remember somebody from the audience had asked, well, what about your kids? And I remember saying, they'll get over it. And I was like, did I really just say that? Because they never got over it. We're still living it. And now my grandkids get to live it. So that's what I'm saying. If I'm not talking about what I did for a living, and I'm not talking about all aspects about what's going on, what do you think that says to them, that I don't value them enough to be honest with them, that I don't value them enough to be truthful with them? And then I'm also teaching them to lie to and not tell the whole truth, and how unfair that is for me to teach them to do those things, just like it was for me with my kids. And what happened too, because I did that with my kids, I carried so much guilt and so much burden on projecting all of their stuff onto me that I could barely breathe. I was grieving, and it hurt me so bad that I hurt them so bad that they had to live like that. Like, how unfair of me to put them in that kind of position in those situations, right? So it wasn't an easy life, as easy as I just thought it was. Like, I breezed through, I went to work, I came home. Like I said, I got to do all the things, but there's a cost. So at what cost did my working in this environment affect my kids? And it was a major thing. So I think it was a major, major life-shifting transformation, even for my kids, right? Because they're still dealing with stuff too. My oldest, my firstborn, has since passed away. In fact, his anniversary is coming up in a couple weeks. It'll be 13 years that he has left the earth to go to be with God in the universe. I know he's here right with me, right beside me, is always helping me get through things. I can feel him, and it's my faith that I just feel Jesus and God and my son and my mom now, and whoever all the other angels are it's like really catapulting me into a whole new level and all new existence into what's becoming. And so, it even my white lies of, not only was it emotional, but it was also spiritual, right? Because during that time too, and I still firmly believe that, but during that time, I firmly believed that God allowed me to do that and was taking care of me. Like I was like, I would tell people, I'm like, this is a God thing. And people are like, no, this is a Satan thing. And I'm like, no, this is a God thing. And now I totally believe it was a God thing. Like I totally do. And there was a time that I walked away from God. I was like furious with God because I'm like, really? Like you took away my husband, you took away my son, my daughter lost a baby, I had cancer, my other son was in prison for unintentional murder, like all these things. And I took all of that guilt on, all of it. Like I was a rottenest mom for being an adult, for being a dancer, a stripper, whatever you want to call me. And so I started taking and labeling myself, right? That I was just all the things. And I've been going through all the things for the last 13 years. And the biggest thing that kept happening too is I kept saying, I'm tired and I'm tired. And I realized, and I shared this last week, was because there was a incident with my oldest when I didn't show up for a doctor's consultation that ultimately led to his life being taken way much earlier than needed to be. And so I'm that person. I just carried on so much guilt and so much of my family. And so for me to be here in Florida and away from them is a really big deal in the first place because I'm never not by them. And my kids nicely kicked me out and said, Mom, you've lived your life for us all your life or all our lives. And we want you to go live your life. Well, guess what? It's a lie. Right? Because I've got to be by my family. My family is my why. They're why I do everything I do. They're why I get out of bed. They're why I do the things I do. And not being able to have those littles on a heart-to-heart like hug and a heart-to-heart love and just a heart-to-heart smile, being in their faces I've definitely grown, like I said, in so much. Being here in Florida has taught me so much in this family that I'm renting from. Like I said, I just love them so much. They're like an extension to me. There's nothing like my family. And so it's a lie being here. I cannot live life without my babies any longer. I gotta go home. And then I realized, I'm like, you know what? So here's another lie I was telling myself is I'm in Minnesota and I really do dislike winters like a lot, really hate them. That's why we end up selling our house. Me and my daughter are like, I am not shoveling one more winter. Like I am not doing it. And I live anywhere again. It's either gonna be warm or somewhere where somebody's shoveling the snow for me. Because I am not doing it. I'm over it. And so so the lie for me too is that I want to be with my family. Right. And so when I'm here and I'm healing and I've been doing a lot of healing and I'm so grateful for this time. And now it's time to be home. And so I had to look at it differently going back. So again, I didn't like what was going on when I lived there before, but I did it to myself. It was my own choices. And I'd lied to myself that I hated it there and didn't like the people. And yes, there was a lot of crazy going on there. And I allowed myself to get all freaked out and paranoid, and, about that. And there's just so much to do in Minnesota and it's beautiful and I love it. And I don't, like I said, I don't like the winter piece, but I like all the other seasons. And I like all that it offers. And I want to do those things with my family. And so I decided that as I go back and when I go back, what I'll be doing is I'll be doing things different. And one, I'll be, getting myself involved with network marketing, networking with other people, other companies, joining meetups, going to, the Chamber of Commerce, learning about my communities, doing the things like you want to do better, you want to be better, you want to do things or go different. Then these are some of, I highly suggest that you take, some steps into bettering yourself, to do the things that you want to do to feel fit, fabulous, fired up, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially. Like there are ways, there are people, and I definitely have the resources for that. I'm super excited about it. I've got the most amazing connections. And again, this has been a year of 10 months of great healing. And again, I just know what I got to do when I go back to Minnesota. And what I'm really excited about is, there are clubs there too that I still know people that run these clubs, right? So I don't have to be down in Florida to do it all. And again, we have such a wonderful technological system where I can actually Zoom people and, chat to people that I can bring them to you. And we talked about the way in the beginning, like 5 weeks ago. And it's just been a journey, folks. I appreciate that you've been hanging in there with me and, doing this live with me. And if you're in replay, let me know in replay. Feel free to hit subscribe. And I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to share it out, I'd love for you to share it out too. So with that, I look forward to next Saturday, 11 Eastern, and we will talk about vanity. And again, I'm Shelly Jean, and I am a former topless entertainer in the adult entertainment industry. I was in it for 17 and a half years, and I definitely got some goods. All right. Love you, my friend. Talk to you later. Have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you so much. Mwah.